Hey, it's Tom from Texas, and it's time for another floppy deep dive, and we're doing another in the series of Commodore versus Atari. Yep, we're up to the letter D, and we're going to be comparing a lot of classic games that start with D. Off the top of my head, Donkey Kong, Defender, Dig Dug, all were released on these systems straight from the Atari, did the port to these systems. And we're not really comparing the systems, we're more just comparing the games. If I went to my buddy's house next door and played the game Dig Dug on his Atari 800XL, and then they came over to my house and played my Commodore 64 Dig Dug version, what was different? What was the graphics different? Were the sounds different? What was controls were different? That's the kind of stuff I'm going to be looking at and comparing. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into these games that start with the letter D. Boom.
Kicking off our retro gaming face-off, we're diving into Donkey Kong, a classic that made its mark in arcades in 1981. And let's compare its performance on both systems, the Commodore 64 and the Atari 800XL. On the Commodore 64, it was released in 1983, and Donkey Kong stays faithful to the arcade classic. The graphics pop with vibrant colors, showcasing the Commodore 64's capability to deliver arcade-like experiences. And Donkey Kong is right where arcade fans remember him, and the controls here are notably smooth, especially when leaping over those rolling barrels. Sometimes you get stuck somewhere like on the ladder or something, or maybe not go up the ladder, but overall I really like the feel of it. And now over on the Atari 800XL, with its version released in 1983, things look slightly different. Noticeably, Donkey Kong is on the opposite side, a departure from the arcade setup, and I'm wondering why they even did that. Why did they put it on there? There has to be a reason. And this isn't an issue on the Commodore 64, where you push the button, you're going to jump. The other thing I noticed, the Atari 800XL version is harder. If I jump and I hit my head on the barrel that's all up above me, it will kill me. In the Commodore 64 version, if I jump and hit my head, it is a lot more forgiving. It does not kill me. So the Atari version definitely has it a little bit harder there. And of course, these were developed by different software teams, and each version reflects its own unique strengths and weaknesses of each one. But I'm going to give this one to the Commodore 64. I just like it. It plays well. The 64 has two versions. It also has one from Ocean Software, but I never really got into that one. I had this one first. This is the one I like, and this is the one I played the most. So that's my vote. I want to know what you vote for. What is your favorite Donkey Kong version out there between these two systems? Put it down in the comments. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So let's dig into Dig Dug, a game that tests your strategy and reflexes in the underground world. And today we're going to compare again C64 versus the Atari and see how they stack up. So on the Commodore 64, developed by Atari Soft ironically in 1983, the graphics look great and closely resemble the arcade version. The C64 lets you pick your starting stage. I always like starting at the beginning, but it's always nice to have the option. And the C64 sound captures the original essence of the game with its memorable tunes and enhancing the whole underground adventure. And the rocks work just like the arcade. You drop two of them, and then you get the bonus fruit for extra points. So now let's switch gears to the Atari 800XL version, developed by Atari in 1982. It maintains the game's essence, but it lacks the Commodore 64's color depth and detail. And I recently picked up a Dig Dug cartridge at our local Atari user group meeting for $5, and I'm glad that I got to use it in this video. I did notice that it has a border around it like the Commodore 64, instead of using the full screen like Atari's known to do. Maybe they just did it to match more of the arcade. And when it comes to controls, both versions offer smooth gameplay. They both have responsive feel that aids in that critical escape from the pukas and the fighters. But the Atari version, it was a little less responsive, especially when it came to the pumps and blowing up the monsters. Now, in comparing both, the Commodore 64 version stands out for its closer arcade-looking graphics and sound. It's my top pick. But what would be your top pick for Dig Dug? Put it down in the comments. I'd like to know. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, let's look at the classic game Defender, and I love this game, and I love the Commodore 64 version. When you look at this and look at the vibrant graphics and how smooth and how good it looks, I just love everything about it. The only thing I would have different on the Commodore 64 is I wish I had a joystick with 2 buttons so I didn't have to hit the space bar to do my smart bomb. And that's the only thing I can find. These graphics are great. I love saving the little humans from the mutants trying to suck them up, and the detail of the mountains and catching them and bringing them down. All of that was just amazing, and it was just so much fun. Now let's move on to the Atari 800XL version of Defender, and this is awesome too. I love the gameplay. There's great movement of it, shooting the mutants and everything. It's not quite as detailed as the Commodore 64. That's the one thing edge that I would give the Commodore 64. It's just that it looks better. But man, this game is fun. And I get Defender on every system that I have it on. I mean, it's on my Atari 5200, 7800. They just made it for everything. I remember playing Defender on the 2600. So I want to know what you guys think. What was your favorite version? This one's a draw for me. I could lean towards the Commodore 64, but I just loved playing both of them. So, want to hear your thoughts? Put them down in the comments. Let's move on to the next one. Alright guys, next we're looking at Demon Attack on the Commodore 64 versus the Atari. And this classic shooter, of course, was originally released by Magic on the Atari 2600, but to my shock and surprise, the Atari 2600 version is the exact same version that's on the Atari 800XL. And that was a little disappointing to me. I thought they would upgrade it or do something to make it look a little bit better. But let's jump in ahead of myself. Let's go back to the Commodore 64 version of Demon Attack. It looks amazing. It came out later than these other ones, but they added these background graphics that made it look really cool. And it reminded me of the arcade game Phoenix, because I think that's what they based that whole game on. And I just love shooting the enemies and they split. And it was just a very well done game. And then we move over to the Atari 800XL. It's still fun. It's that classic Atari 2600, but it's no contest to the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 version just blows it away, and you can just eyeball it and see that from the very beginning. And so, even though I wanted more out of the Atari 800XL, it was fun still playing that game, but Commodore 64 definitely takes this round. What are your thoughts about it, guys? I love this game. If you played it on the 2600, you have great memories of it too. So just tell me, what's your favorite? Let's move on to the next one. Now we're going to be looking at Drol, and there's just something unique and challenging about this game that every time I load it up, I seem like I just keep playing and it's hard for me to stop. So let's look at the C64 and the Atari 800XL versions and compare. Now, the Commodore 64 one I played a lot, and it took me a while to figure out what exactly I was supposed to be doing in this flying robot that's going around trying to rescue these people, rescue the little girl chasing her balloon, or the little boy chasing his helicopter, or the lizard with the rocket on his back. It's just had really cool, engaging characters in there. From the little shaman jumping around to the bird flying in the air. If you shoot them, they turn into a turkey. I just loved it all, and it was just really well done by Broderbund, who made this game. So if you've never played this one, and this one's a little bit out there a little bit, but I think most people have this in their library or downloaded probably off of BBS's. But the Commodore 64 really did a good job with the gameplay, really smooth, really fun, easy to shoot, and just really like that one. And the Atari 800XL, also great gameplay, good charm. They kept it in there. Not as vivid as the Commodore 64, but definitely commendable. Both games do well with this game. It's just a fun one. Love playing it. Love to pull out the joystick and be able to play this one. And I'm glad that it ended up on this list of these 9 games. So, in conclusion, again, I'm going with the Commodore 64 version. Now let's step into the world of David's Midnight Magic, a captivating pinball simulation that graced the screens of the Apple II first in 1982, and it quickly made its mark on the Commodore 64 and the Atari 800XL, delivering that arcade pinball experience right into your home. And on the Commodore 64, David's Midnight Magic really does a great job of showing the graphics at that time. I believe it came out in 1983. And they did a really good job of replicating a real pinball machine. I think this is the first time I played pinball that I can remember on a computer that wasn't actually a pinball machine. And the flipper hits and the bumper bounces really just felt authentic. And you could have 4-player action going on this. And then going over to the Atari 800XL, it looks very similar as the Commodore 64, maybe not quite as vibrant, but it still played just the same, very streamlined, easy to play. In fact, I would turn the joystick upside down. I liked knowing the sides where I was doing the flippers better when I had it upside down. Where on the Commodore 64, I would use the keyboard, and I couldn't figure out how to use the keyboard on the Atari. But if I had a choice, I'd probably just do the keyboard every time. But it's not just the graphics and sounds. The gameplay experience differs very slightly between the two platforms. The C64 version offers more of an intuitive control scheme, making it easier to do it. But there's just a very slight edge. And who is David? David is David Snyder. He's the one who created this game. And he did an excellent job bringing the pinball machine to the Commodore and to the Atari 800XL. So which one did you prefer? It's a toss-up for me. I wasn't big into pinball. I did remember getting this as one of my earliest games that I got on the Commodore 64, but I want to know what you guys think about it. Next up, we're going to be looking at the game Deflektor, which is a puzzle game that was quite popular, but for me, I never played it before. At least I don't remember ever playing it before. So I played first time on the Commodore 64 and the Atari 800XL to make this video. And the objective of Deflektor is you guide this beam of light around each level in order to light up or deactivate all the different deflectors that are present. And the challenge comes from the fact that the light beam must be directed carefully to avoid obstacles and hazards like mines, which can destroy the beam. And additionally, the player has to manage the beam's energy level. And if the beam overheats, then it's game over. So it was fun. It's a nice little strategic game for the Commodore 64. And I also played it on the Atari 800XL. And it was very similar on that system too. Enjoyed it. I thought the graphics looked good on that too. I think there's some story behind it where they thought this game was lost for the Atari. I don't know if it was officially released, but then they found it like in 1995. And I'm glad they did, because this game needs to be on both systems. It's really tough. I didn't get past the first part, but I didn't dive into it more than just making the video, but definitely will load this one up again and play it again. This game led success. It was on the Amstrad CPC, the ZX Spectrum, and the Atari ST. So I'd like to know your thoughts on this game. Go ahead and put them down in the comments, and let's move on to the next one. So now we are going to be looking at the game DropZone. Archer McLean's homage to the game Defender. It's a high-octane side-scrolling shooter originally developed for the Atari 8-bit family in 1984, but it also was later ported to the Commodore 64. And on the Commodore 64, DropZone is celebrated for its smooth and engaging design. Its 46 code base containing 15,000 lines and 350 subroutine demonstrates the technical prowess behind the development. And this version is a testament to the Commodore 64 capabilities, offering a rich and responsive gameplay experience. And Arch McLean initially purchased an Atari 800 and began developing what would become DropZone. And the Atari version is known for its speed and its ability to handle multiple elements on the screen without compromise. And despite the technical differences, the Atari and the Commodore 64 versions maintain visual and sonic consistency. So I would say DropZone's legacy is significant. It influenced a generation of shooters and is remembered for its challenging gameplay, its innovative design, and the game's development history is marked with McLean's dedication in a legal battle with U.S. Gold over royalties and showcasing the challenges that were faced by the developers during that era. So, which version reigns supreme? While the Atari speed and technical prowess are impressive, I say the Commodore 64's graphic finesse and gameplay may give it the edge. DropZone remains a classic, a shining example of innovation in the world of retro gaming. But which one did you like? Put it down in comments and let's move on to the next one. And last but not least is Drelbs, an intriguing maze game that challenges your wit and reflexes. Originally developed for the Atari 8-bit family in 1983, Drelbs ventured into the Commodore 64 a year later, and it brings its unique puzzle mechanics to a broader audience. So first, let's explore the Commodore 64 version and its world of vibrant colors and smooth gameplay. And I liked running around creating these squares. I didn't know what I was doing at first, but then when the girl pops up in the box and then it changes to a monster and you gotta get in there quick before it changes to a monster or I'll kill you. And then you got this random ball and paddle that's going around the screen that will just randomly release a fire out that could kill you. It's just a really weird and unique game, but I enjoyed it. I liked it. I did read reviews online that people didn't think that it would be something you'd play over and over again, and it probably isn't, but it's really unique, and I hope that y'all have seen this one before, and I hope that you're a fan of Drelbs, because after I played it and remembered it, I like it too. And now shifting gears to the Atari 800XL, you get a little different take on it, and the version may not match the Color 64 color depth, but it has its own charm, and it felt very, very similar, the two gameplays to me. And the audio was good, everything was good. Usually when it comes to the sound between the Pokey and the SID chip, I think they're very similar. I'm sure the SID chip, I would say, is probably a little bit better, but the Pokey sounds really good to me. But it's not just about graphics and sound. The gameplay experience varies between the two. The C64 version boasts an intuitive control scheme, offering a smoother journey through it. Might give it a slight edge. They're always giving the reviews that the 64 has a little bit more of a better control scheme and give it a slight edge, but I really didn't see that big a difference between both systems, to be honest. So there you have it. That's the games that I was looking at that started with the letter D. Did I leave an important one out that started with the letter D? I want to hear down in the comments which systems did you like for each of the games I did show, and what game did I forget to show that started with the letter D? I'm sure there's something out there that's a classic. I couldn't go through all of them, or this video would just be way, way too long. And some games just don't come across well in video, like text-based games, unless you add like ChatGPT like I did in the past. But that is what we have to offer. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you so much for sharing and being part of my retro community. And this is what YouTube's telling you to watch next. So go ahead and check out these other videos, because this is what they want you to watch. Boom.